My name is Belén del Cerro. I am the Spanish Industrial Liaison Officer for ITER and other fusion-related devices. I am working for CTTI, the Spanish Innovation Agency. So first of all, I would like to thank all the participants across Europe who have shown interest and have registered to this webinar. And we hope to meet your expectation and to provide a glimpse of what future fusion research infrastructures will look like in terms of new projects and technologies required by industry. So it's also a privilege to welcome our speakers, and I would like to thank all of them for finding time in their busy agendas. As you all know, CDTI is heading the organization of the second edition of the Big Science Business Forum, in close collaboration with 11 big science organizations in the areas of astronomy, fusion, and high energy accelerators and synchrotrons. In the path towards Big Science Business Forum, we have organized a series of webinars dealing with different topics of interest surrounding the big science market. And complementary to what will be presented to industry in Granada in October 2022. Which are the business opportunities from the main big science organizations in the period 2022-2026, worth more than 37 billion euros. So this new webinar miniseries tries to look more into the future to explore the long-term plans of the most relevant fusion big science research infrastructures. Our aim is to show industry what technologies will be relevant in the long term and how they can get involved in the different development programs of several fusion research infrastructures. The experience has shown us that knowing the roadmaps and infrastructure plans well in advance help industry develop its capabilities and skills, especially in the case of SMEs. So in order to illustrate the long-term view, we have assembled a selected group of speakers. We represent the main facilities included in the European roadmap to fusion, but we will also have the opportunity to take a glimpse to what future may bring in terms of new breakthroughs developed by innovative companies out of the European roadmap. So thank you all again for your enthusiasm and your availability for this webinar. The agenda of the webinar is broken down into presentations from the four speakers from EUROFusion, ITER, DONS, and Tokamak Energy, who will each have 20 minutes to lay out their future plans and initiatives. When they finish, I will welcome my colleague Søren Kolsholm, the Danish ILO for ITER and chair of the Fusion ILO network, who will moderate the roundtable session. This session will be fed by the questions that you submit during the session using the question and answer Zoom module. So please come up with interesting topics for all the speakers to be addressed during the roundtable. Please, one last message, don't use the chat for question and answer, use the question and answer module instead, okay? So I will now share my screen. Okay. Before we start the webinar, and for those who are not familiarized with the Big Science Business Forum, I will steal 5 minutes of the speaker's time to give a brief introduction. So Big Science Business Forum 22 is a business-oriented congress which will congregate the main European research infrastructures in the domain of astronomy, fusion, and particle physics. Focus on technology with the aim to be the main meeting point between research infrastructures and industry to explore business opportunities worth, as I said before, in more than 37 billion euros between 2022 and 2026. The Congress will take place in Granada, a city that will host donors, and also a beautiful and unique city in Spain, between the 4th and the 7th of October next year. So 11 big science organizations, including EUROFusion, donors, and Ed4E, which are present today, are organizing this Congress This will be the second edition of the event after the success of the previous edition in Copenhagen in 2018, where more than 1,000 participants from more than 500 organizations and 29 countries gathered together to discuss the future prospect of the big science market. So registration for the event is now open through our webpage. In the 2 days Congress program, as you can see in this slide, is structured by technologies. So depending on your area of knowledge, you can sign up to specific technology-oriented parallel sessions, which will cover different areas such as electronics, instruments, materials, ICT, control systems, cryogenic, and vacuum. In each of these areas, technical speakers from the research organization will lay out the tender opportunities for the coming years. We could also organize thematic parallel sessions dealing with research infrastructures and in Horizon Europe, industrial opportunities for IFMIF donors and SMEs, among other topics. There is also the possibility for non-member research infrastructures to participate as affiliated big science organizations in the Congress. For the time being, we have 4 affiliated big science organizations, and in January 2022, we will open a call for new ones. Selected infrastructures will be entitled to take part in a specific parallel session to present the business opportunities and make use of all the resources of the Congress. The Congress will also include an industrial exhibition with more than 100 stands already sold, but there are still a small number of exhibition stands available. So please contact us if you are interested. Big Science Business Forum will also host for the first time a technology transfer track, to which we devoted one of our last webinars. The objective of the track is to make technology transfer really happens at Big Science Business Forum and prove that the big science is indeed a valuable ecosystem to develop innovative technologies which can be transferable to other markets. Any participant, one registered to the Congress, can submit a proposal to present his technology in this technology transfer track, where we will set up a series of closed meetings with interested stakeholders running during the Congress. Another staple of Big Science Business Forum is the SME track, which features a compilation of European experienced SMEs in the big science market and promising SMEs with much to offer. All this combined with 2 interesting site visits to the Almería Solar Platform and the Calar Alto Observatory. And much more, such as the first Women in Big Science event that intends to provide a platform where public organizations and industries operating in big science projects can share their experience, learning lessons, and best practice on policies to increase the participation of women in this market. And of course, a social program in Granada in early October for a truly unique experience. So please take note of the important days. Early next year, we will also open the 3rd and final call for APSOS. Besides this, registration to Big Science Business Forum is currently open through our webpage, with early bird registration closing on the 30th of April. The same date is the deadline for submission of technology transfer proposal eligible for the technology transfer track. And right after that, we will open the request for B2Bs and B2Cs and attendance to the technology transfer meetings. And all leading up to meet all of you in October next year in Granada. What is coming up? So next up in the series is the webinar devoted to high energy accelerators and synchrotrons on the 30th of November. With this last webinar, we hope to provide you a full picture of the big science market in the coming years. So this is my last slide. Please check the Big Science Business Forum website and stay tuned in our social networks. And of course, we are looking forward to seeing you in Granada next year. So now we can start with the presentations from our speakers. As I said before, please submit your questions using the question and answer module, and we will address them during the final section of the webinar. Our first speaker will be Tony Donnet, EUROFusion Program Manager. EUROFusion is the European consortium for the development of fusion energy that support and funds the fusion research activities on behalf of the European Commission's Euratom program. This agreement was signed on October 2014 by the main fusion research bodies from the European Union member states and Switzerland. And we are really grateful to Tony Donnet for taking part in this webinar, giving the audience information on the EUROFusion roadmap, which provides a clear and structured way forward to commercial electricity from fusion. Tony, the floor is yours when you want.
Thank you very much, Belen, for the introduction. So I will go quickly through on the European roadmap and especially focus on demo. I always need to figure out how I can play my slides around. Many people of you know ITER, know Fusion for Energy, which is the other European fusion organization. And I hope that my colleague from Fusion for Energy is not upset, but I always say that Fusion for Energy is turning European taxpayers' money into concrete and stainless steel, because they're really focused on building and procurements of big devices, ITER, but also GT60 in Japan. EUROFusion is a consortium of 30 national research institutes from 28 European countries, which do actually the research for fusion. We have a roadmap. It's given here. The QR code gives you the downloadable roadmap. Looks pretty empty, but the final goal of the roadmap is to lay the foundation for the fusion power plant. And by far the most important device in the short term is ITER. ITER will not lead us to the fusion power plant. For that we need another device, and that's called DEMO. DEMO will, for the first time, demonstrate electricity from fusion. There's not a timeline here along this axis, but you can see first plasma in ITER is still predicted in 2025. Full performance should start in 2035. So that gives roughly the time schedule. And you can see that the conceptual design will be finished 5 years after first plasma in ITER, around 2030, and we start constructing in 2040. Electricity production is somewhere in the first half of the first part of the second half of the century. To help make ITER a success and also to guide the demo design, we're doing research on many devices throughout Europe, and I will shortly report on that. Experimental work, but we also do analysis and modeling work. Then very important for demo is we need materials which can withstand the enormous Neutron loads. And for that we are using now materials test facilities. But the ultimate proof of the pudding is to test the materials with 14 MeV neutrons. And for that we need a facility called IFMIF DONUS, the demo-oriented neutron source, and Angel Ibarra will speak about that. And then we have Stellarator. Stellarator is another confinement device which has some advantages above a tokamak, but it's also a little bit more complicated in setup. And around 2030, we want to take a decision whether we keep this line open or whether we fully concentrate on the tokamak. And ultimately, we want to have fusion economics, so we are working on lowering the cost as much as possible, concept improvements, innovations. And what we are presently looking at is the first 7 years of the program until 2027, which in the European Commission they call Horizon Europe. I always call it Horizon EUROFusion. So in our roadmap, we have 8 missions. The first one is plasma regimes of operation to try to get high performance operation, fusion conditions, but still have benign conditions for the wall. Very important is to do that in machines which have a metal inside. Like JAD was completely changed from carbon to a beryllium wall and a tungsten diverter. We have Aztecs, which has a complete tungsten inside. And also Western France is completely metal. At this very moment, while we are speaking, JET is doing DT discharges, and the focus is to get, let's say, a power level of, well, this is kind of optimistic, but let's say between 10 and 15 megawatt for 5 seconds, which would be, let's say, an increase of the previous world record, which is 4.5 megawatt for 5 seconds. Our second mission is on the heat exhaust, because we need to extract roughly 400 megawatt of energy from the device. Most of that is done by uniformly radiating the power over the surface. But then still the diverter at the bottom of the device, that's where the highest heat loads are. We are looking in new concepts like the snowflake, super X diverter, double diverters to really spread the heat over multiple footprints. We're doing that in various devices, but at the same time, we're also studying the behavior of materials in linear devices like the superconducting Magnum PSI in the Netherlands. These are devices in hot cells in Jülich, a plasma source in Ukraine. The third mission is on the development of neutron-resistant materials, where now the latest is that we're looking in tungsten fiber composites, like, well, this is tungsten fiber tungsten, which has a much better fracture toughness. But we're also looking in laminated structures or copper chrome zirconium pipes with tungsten casted into it, which is much better. Ultimately, we test this in IFMIF donors, so I will not say much about it as Angel Ibarra is doing. And at this moment, together with Japan, as part of the broader approach, we have developed this prototype called IFMIF IVIDA, which is at this moment the world's most powerful deuterium accelerator. Our basic materials here are Urfer 97 for the structural components, tungsten for the high heat flux components, copper chrome zirconium for the cooling. And what I said, we used materials test reactors up to now. But if we really go to high fluences, which are expressed in displacements per atoms, then we need a device like IFMIF donors. Our fourth mission is the tritium self-sufficiently. This graph shows the world commercial available supply of tritium, which is 20-25 kilogram. And ITER will use most of it while it's coming in a high power operation. And this means that any reactor afterwards needs to produce its own tritium. And this is what we are testing in ITER. But demo, which we are working on, needs to provide its own tritium. I take mission 5 and 6 together. Mission 5 is the implementation of intrinsic safety features. And everything we are doing now from the very first designs, safety comes first. It's a nuclear device. We need to think about licensing, and therefore you need to incorporate a safety culture in let's say, the demo team. We want to have an integrated demo design, which means we want to have a holistic design, optimizing the machine as a whole rather than optimizing individual components. And also here we're looking into, let's say, things like remote handling, replacing a complete blanket banana by a lift rather than having individual blanket modules, because ultimately fusion power plant, if you want to replace a blanket module, you need to do that on a Monday morning rather than in the second half year of the year 2043 or something like that. So there's some ITER differences between ITER and demo. ITER is really an experimental device where we want to develop the plasmas. Demo will be much closer to a commercial power plant, but there will be still some development missions. ITER will not have yet a tritium breeding requirements, but there will be test blanket modules. But demo needs to be self-sufficient with tritium. In ITER we use conventional 316 stainless steel for the in-vessel. Whereas in demo, we're working towards nuclear hardened novel reduced activation materials as structure for the breeding blankets. The neutron fluence in ITER is very modest, whereas in demo it's significant. So we really need to take care that there could be in-vessel materials damage. And the cooling of the system in ITER is optimized for minimum stresses and size for modest heat rejection. And in demo, it needs to be optimized for electricity generation. I get often the question, can you work already on demo while ITER is still not being working? Yes, we can. This shows the ITER schedule, so the light blocks and the demo schedule. And you can see that at each phase in ITER, we feed information from ITER into our demo design. So in, let's say, 2025, we have information on the assembly, on the integrated design, the testing and commissioning of vacuum vessel, of magnets, of cryoplant. And then while we go further, we get, for instance, the information from the test blanket modules, the information on the long pulse operation. During our pre-concept design phase, we realized that we need to go to a more systems-oriented approach to rationalize our blanket choices. So we switched from, let's say, 2 helium-cooled devices to a helium-cooled and a water-cooled lithium lead system. What is very important is to have early attention to the industrial feasibility and also the nuclear safety, and to develop a technology maturation plan. It's very clear that, let's say, the demo design should drive the research rather than the research should drive the demo design. Important to embed more industry, also to have a closer interaction with the physics program. Important is also to train new young engineers, because we see that there's some critical areas where now people are slowly leaving because of pensions, etc. We need to take care that we have a new young generation ready, and we need to implement a gate review process to validate our design. So here are some general design features. Still, let's say many choices are open, but you can see demo is relatively large. It's a device which is based on ITER. So what we find, if we want to make the machine smaller, then it's basically the diverter which is at the end killing us, as well as the wall loads on the materials. So we are, for the time being, focusing on this, but we are exploring the available design space. So this is not yet a fixed choice. The idea is to go to a pulsed device. As I said, the main materials are given here. It's still using the classical superconductors, although we are looking into high temperature superconductors for the main solenoid. And well, let me skip this also for the sake of time. So we are looking into many of the different design issues which are given here. To protect the first wall from tangents, the first wall in demo will be very thin, because the neutrons should pass the wall and deposit their energy in the blanket. We are looking into the breeding blanket coolant options of the overall design. We need to develop an overall plasma scenario which has no edge localized modes. We are looking into the different diverter options. We look into the vertical maintenance of the breeding blanket to really take out half of the breeding blanket at once. We are looking already in the building layouts, and also to look into the internal recycling pumping systems. We already succeeded to reduce the tritium inventory in demo by about a factor of 10, so which is very good. What is new is that we are now also using technology hubs. So we have many technology facilities which we're using for studying breeding blankets, magnets, diverter, and all the different components. And the idea is to have technology readiness assessments by independent expert panels, where we also involve ITER and Fusion for Energy and industry. Already we are working with many industries. We have a industrial framework contract with the European Commission, which is run by these three companies: Empresarios Agrupados in Spain, Ansaldo Nucleare, and Framatome. but they can also put tasks to SMEs and other companies. And here you can see some other companies which are already involved in our work. So the organization we set up, we have a central team. Gianfranco Federici is the head. As many of you know, we are happy that Joël Elbas, who is now still in ITER, will join our team from January. We have Hartmut Sohm for the Plasma System Division, Michael Portland for the Plasma System Design Division. We have a project integration office, which is headed by Christophe Belay. And so you can see the central team focuses really on the integration of all the different work packages. But we have something like 12 work packages, which are focusing on the different aspects. And these work all very closely together. I just heard Belen saying something about women in big science. I'm very happy that in the very technology-oriented work packages, 4 of the 12 work packages are led by females. A competitive cost of electricities, we are looking in HTS superconductors, as we think it's good to lower the price of cryogenics. We're looking into additive manufacturing, but also virtual engineering and other ways to reduce the cost. And then the last mission is the stellarator, which, well, as you can see, this is a superconducting device, Wendelstein 7X. It's already up and running in Greifswald in northern Germany. This device has some advantages because it's steady state. It doesn't have edge localized modes, but to think about remote handling of blanket modules in this device is let's say, quite difficult. Well, the thinking is not difficult, but to realize it. So this brings me to my conclusion. So as EUROFusion, we coordinate the research all over Europe. We are not building big machines, but we are really coordinating the research. We are responsible for IFMIF donors for the engineering design, but also the commissioning of the linear particle accelerator EUROCASIO. You will hear more about that from Angel. And we are presently undertaking the conceptual design of DEMO, which is the first 500 megawatt electricity producing plant. And we are gradually involving more and more industry in the conceptual design. And I think this is my very last slide showing all the different laboratories which are involved. So thank you very much, Belen, and thank you very much, participants, for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Tony, for explaining us the basis of the European roadmap. We have seen that in the long term, the fusion program will move from being laboratory-based and science-driven towards an industry and technology-driven venture with many industrial opportunities ahead of us. Thank you, Tony. Our second speakers are Leonardo Biagioni, ETFORI Deputy Chief Financial Officer, and Victor Saez, Head of Market Analysis Group. As we all know, ETFORI, Fusion for Energy, is the European domestic agency of the ITER project. ITER is one of the most ambitious energy projects in the world today, and is being built in southern France, in Cadarache, by 35 nations. ITER is the world's largest tokamak, a magnetic fusion device that has been designed to prove the feasibility of fusion as a large-scale and carbon-free source of energy based on the same principle that powers our sun and stars. First plasma of ITER is expected in 2025, and Leonardo and Victor will illustrate us on the future developments and plans beyond first plasma and how industry could be involved. So when you want.
Thank you, Belen. Victor, I think your microphone is off.
Now it should be on. Fine. Thank you, Leonardo. Sorry for that. Okay, so I will begin, and then I will pass the floor to my boss, to Leonardo, that will keep on the presentation. So thank you, Belen, first of all, for inviting us, for being here today. I will begin with something that it is already very familiar to you, but I wanted to present this to put us in context. As you can see from the screen and this slide that you have seen many times, you will see that since the pre-industrial era around mid-19th century, the need for energy has sharply increased. This increase has been amplified considerably during the 20th century, and actually during the last 50 years has increased by 400%. So we have foreseen that in the next 20 years, we will keep going up. So this for sure, it is linked with also global warming, and this is something that it is being discussed these days in COP26. So against this background, we want to be part of the answer, and this is our contribution to the solution. This is the ITER site, and these are how the works are evolving in the site. So as I was mentioning, I was referring to COP26. On these days, more than 190 world leaders, along with tens of thousands of negotiators, government representatives, business people, and citizens alike, are discussing in Glasgow the threat of climate change. Fusion has its place in this discussion. Actually, on the 4th of November, ITER was given the opportunity to present the status of fusion research. There were 7 projects presented in short 2-minute video clips, including GT60 in Japan, EAST in China, K-STAR in Korea, Bedelstein 7X accelerator in Germany, and JET in the United Kingdom. So fusion energy, not fusion for energy, but fusion energy as a whole. I think that even our colleagues from Tokamak Energy were there on the 4th of November. Well, David will confirm later. In any case, tomorrow again, from 11:30 GMT, so 11:30 London time, there will be also a presentation by Bernard Bigot, the General Director of the ITER organization, that together with some key representatives from the fusion field will invite world leaders to look towards a future in which fusion is a key part of the zero carbon energy mix. So I will invite you, well, in the slides that will be distributed, you can click on top of the photograph, and then you will be brought to the streaming. We also, I mean, we as Fusion for Energy, we also have some presence in COP26, and our director, Johannes Schwemmer, he is publishing an article in the electronic magazine of the COP26 Congress, together with some world leaders. So again, if you want to take a look, you can just click on the photograph and will be brought to the place. So, but now let's move into more in the task that we have now, not looking into the next 50 years or 100 years, but what FORI is on his plate now. So on screen, you have a cut and paste from the Council decision creating Fusion for Energy in 2007. And these boxes represent the 3 tasks that we were given. The first one here, it is to provide the contribution of the European Union, of the Euratom, to the ITER International Fusion Organization. The second one is about a broader approach or a project with Japan. And the third one is the preparation and coordination of the program of activities in preparation of demo and IFMIF that Tony was referring, because now this is being led by EUROFusion. You will also see that there are some strange colors here. It is not that I was getting crazy about the green. These ones to represent the percentage of completion of our work in these 3 tasks. As you can see from our first task, so the contribution to the ITER, we are beyond half, because we are getting closer and closer to first plasma that wants to be represented here by this blue line. For broader approach, we have almost completed our assignment. And for demo, it is, well, we are a bit behind, because as I was mentioning, and as Tony was referring before, this is being led now by EUROFusion. So let's move into this, which I believe this may be of more interest these days, because this is our immediate assignment. So we are talking about first plasma. On the screen, you have the schedule, the agreed schedule for first plasma that you can find it here, and this is today. So this schedule is being updated constantly. So it may not be like this at the end. In any case, I think that for our presentation today, what it is more important, it is not how far or how close we are for first plasma, but what is the share of the industry on this, how we count with industry for sustaining this effort. So as you can see here at the bottom of this slide, from 2007, and that we began our endeavor for first plasma, we have spent like 6.8 billion euros to reach where we are today. And we have another 5 to go from now to 27. So as you can see, even though most of the work for first plasma, most of the procurement has been already placed, we have a lot more to come. Actually, we have as much for the next 5 years that we have had for the last 10 years. So I believe that this is important information for industry, because this shows that, well, it is worth thinking about fusion as a potential source of business, which is confirmed here in this next slide, where you can see the the forthcoming business opportunities. So administration is, well, in administration, we have a couple of call for tenders being presented these days, one for the provision of legal services and another one for the negotiation of learning and training. This later one was published already some few days ago. More technical, from a more technical point of view, which may be more interest for you, we have broader approach. There have been 2 market surveys closed recently on GT60 divertor, and we have 3 more call for tenders being presented or in the next few months. So we have the GT60 weight guides that are expected for the first quarter of 2022, as it is the case also for the diamond windows for the transmission line or solid state power amplifiers for IFMIF that need to be replaced. On the cryoplan and fuel cycle, we have 2 different things. On one hand, we have the signature of the second procurement arrangement with IO. Procurement arrangement stands for the packages of procurement that we signed with ITER International Organization. And well, there is the second amendment coming these days that will later result in new call for tenders being published in this respect. Something that it is already a reality is the OP1174 on cryolines, cryojumpers, and just on couplings that should be presented, should be published in the following few days. On diagnostics, which is one of the areas in which we expect to have a lot of activities in the next few years, we have in the immediate, we have a call for tender for stainless steel material and rhodium target for before the end of this year. And we are going to publish a market survey for getting the information about the industry, about your interest in this field for the ports, manufacturing, and assembly. Also, there is a forthcoming market survey for the second plasma manufacturing and of diagnostics, which is very similar to OMF 1126. This is a call for tender that has been published this year on diagnostics. It was in spring. Finally, I would like to close with the neutral beam and electron cyclotron power supplies. We have the neutral beam vacuum vessels, well, the nuclear stainless steel structures that have been published also a week ago. I think it was Thursday last week. Then we have some new call for tenders incoming for the next year. I'm referring to the neutral being called bulk boxes, the active correction compensation coils, and the neutral being tooling that will come not before 22nd. So this is in short the information that actually will be also available in our industry portal. Maybe that I forgot to include here a slide about our industry portal, because this is the place where we are making publicity of our business opportunities. And as usual, I will invite you that if you are not already registered, you do it, because this will allow you to have updated information of whichever business opportunity is being dealt by Fusion for Energy. I would also like to refer, even though this is not within the scope of Fusion for Energy, but I believe that it may be interesting for you, about the forthcoming business opportunities from ITER.io. I am referring only to the call for nominations. If you are familiar with the way in which IO is publishing their business opportunities, you may remember that first they publish a call for nominations that domestic agencies, Fusion for Energy, we are requested to provide the names of potential candidates. So we publish this in our industry portal so that companies are contacting us, and we provide this list to ITER.io. Then ITER.io, then they go through the pre-qualification stage, and they select a number of companies that are later called for the contacted for the call for tender. So the stage that it is more important for you is the open call for nomination. These two open call for nominations are available now, so we are expecting your interest, and then we will forward this information to ITER.io. In the website of ITER.io, you may also take a look. You may also want to take a look on the forthcoming business opportunities. This is an example of what you can find there, but the list is not complete because there are many of them. So I will suggest again that you visit their website, that you have a link here on the screen. So for the next year, as you can imagine, the most important things will be coming from the side of assembly and hot cell. These are very big projects that are being led by ITER organization, and that may have your interest. Then now I think that it is time to pass the floor to Leonardo. Leonardo, are you?
Yes, thank you, Victor.
Yes.
And good morning to everybody. Victor, may you please move to the next slide?
Yes.
So Victor has provided you with an overview of the situation in the plans in the short term. I will extend the scope of our presentation a bit further.
Sorry, Leonardo, it is being a bit blocked now, but it should be resuming now. So
okay, so I will speak while the slides.
Okay.
Okay.
Here it is.
So I will broaden a bit the discussion. Please, Victor, click on the animation.
Yes.
This is just to remind, it's to reconnect to what Tony was saying a few minutes ago. There is a roadmap for fusion in Europe, which extends over many years and covers many different undertakings. And this roadmap is EUROFusion's roadmap, and it's also FRE's roadmap. It's a single roadmap for all the European organizations working in fusion research. What is important to remark is that because of the way in which the fusion development in Europe is organized, there is, as the activities on the different machines progresses, there is the plan is to have as well a progressive transfer of responsibility from EUROFusion to FRE. Once a machine, an installation enters the construction or the industrial construction phase, the responsibility is progressively transferred to Fusion for Energy, which is equipped to deal with the large industrial manufacturing works contracts. So you can see that this has already happened for ITER. There was a transition, a handover, which occurred more than 10 years ago, effectively. Same for GT60. It has not yet happened for IFMIF Dones. in the sense that the responsibility is with EUROFusion. Fusion for Energy will enter at a later moment, and of course it has not happened yet and will not happen for many years for the demonstration fusion reactor. Next slide, please, Victor. In our interaction with the industry, we have many different rules, but there is a set of objectives which were given by the member states, which are summarized in our industrial policy. We consider the industrial policy to be really one of the founding documents, strategic documents for FRE, because it really summarizes what we have as a mandate as an organization. And you can see the industrial policy on this slide. Clearly, the focus, the objective number one at the moment is delivering the European contribution to ITER and broader approach, making the best use of industrial and research potential of all FRE members, which means that we are explicitly requested to search around the different FRE member states and to make sure that the best of the best, which is available in Europe, is used for fulfilling this obligation. The second objective is very important, especially in the longer term, is to make sure that Europe will have and will maintain a sustainable fusion supply chain in the years to come, so that whichever skills, facility, technology comes out of the ITER activities today will be then available in the future for donors, for demo, and for whatever will come later. And the third important objective is, and we are all aware of the fact that a large project such as the fusion ones, has a positive effect on the innovation and competitiveness in general in the member states in Europe. And we have as a third objective to make sure that this positive impact is captured, amplified as much as possible, and exploited. Next slide, please, Victor. Victor already mentioned the fact that the funding, we have quite a stable funding level. We had a stable funding level in the past 10 years, and we will have presumably in the next 10 years. The funding level is in average in the order of 700 to 800 million euros per year. We work as any other European Union organization on the basis of a 7-year plan. The last one was approved last year, and it covers the time frame 2021-2027. This is the 5 billions which were mentioned earlier by Victor. This is not the end of it. This is just the money which has already been allocated by the Union and the member states for fusion activities or construction of fusion machines. But there is going to be another slice of funding which will come after 2027, because in fact, and you can probably see these combining the various information you are receiving, the development and construction activities of fusion machines in Europe will continue for many decades. We still have many decades of these in front of us. Next slide, please, Victor. When we work on these industrial policy objectives, we work on many different directions. In particular, we work seeking a continuous interaction with the supply chain, which is what we're doing today here in this seminar, and what we will do in the BSBF event next year. It is super important because, as was already stressed also by Tony, none of these machines can exist without a strong partnership with industry. The research community is not able to build this scale of machine. These are definitely industrial undertakings. We interact with the industry through market surveys. Through our webpage or industry portal, we request companies to answer questions about the availability of technologies or services. We have info days. Well, unfortunately, in the past 2 years due to COVID, we didn't have that many info days, but our intention is to restart very, very quickly. We have an ILO network, and I see Ana Belén in the corner of my screen. So Ana Belén is one of the ILOs for Spain specifically, but there are ILOs with the same role in most of the member states. So you can get their contact and get continuous information about what is happening around ITER and around the other FOE projects, and so forth. Next slide, please, Victor. Here, I think maybe I can just quickly start and then hand over to Victor. But clearly, in view of this long-term strategy, it's essential that we manage the intellectual property which is generated in a careful way. And this is one of the tasks which FOE has. FOE inherited, in a sense, the intellectual property which had been produced during previous years in other fusion programs. Some of you may remember there used to be an agreement called EFTA some 10, 15 years ago. So the intellectual property from EFTA was inherited by Fusion for Energy, and of course Fusion for Energy during the construction of the ITER components has accumulated more intellectual property, and managing this intellectual property, making it available in fact to companies for continuing in the long term is one of our important tasks. Please, Victor, I think you can pick up from here.
Yes, thank you. Well, you refer to most of the information for this slide, because actually, well, as you were mentioning, well, the best way to foster the European innovation competitiveness, which is our third objective, is to make this happen through real terms and conditions in our contractual activity. So it is not blah blah that we are doing. It is that we are including in our contracts the possibility for our contractors to make use of the technologies that are being created, and to have some limited access only on a need-to-know basis to the background knowledge that they are bringing to our activities. So for making even more patent this idea, we have embarked in a technology transfer program. We have created a marketplace that, again, if you hover your mouse over the photograph, you can be brought to the website. In this marketplace, we are fostering the licensing of fusion technologies that our contractors are developing for us. So as you can see in this slide, these are examples of technologies that are being developed within the last few years, and that we want to give a hand to our contractors for them to market these technologies beyond the fusion field. On top, we are having a couple of activities just to keep on the same idea. We had a technology transfer award published earlier this year of 10K, which was quite successful. And we are now evaluating a demonstrator project. We were publishing after the summer break a call for tender for a technology transfer demonstrators, where we were offering 35,000 euro for those companies willing to make an effort to bring fusion technologies a bit farther in the TRL, in the technology readiness level, and to make them, to put them at use. So we are evaluating now the offers received. So I think that this summarizes what we are doing in this third objective to foster innovation and competitiveness. Well, together with what Leonardo was referring before, I think that we come to an end. I don't know, Leonardo, if you want to summarize or maybe
no,
that we are jumping.
I think it's, for me, it's sufficient. Then we will have, I assume, questions later on.
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Leonardo and Victor, for such an interesting presentation on the procurement plans of the flagship project of the European roadmap. Now we will take a look at IFMIF DONES, the demo-oriented neutron source, a neutron source for fusion-like materials testing that will allow us to understand the degradation of the materials and components properties throughout the reactor operational life, As you can imagine, it's a key issue for demo and future fusion reactors to allow the design and subsequent facility licensing by the corresponding safety authorities. So DONIS is also an ESFRI project, the European Strategy Forum on Research Infrastructures, since 2018. So now it's a privilege to welcome Ángel Ibarra, the consortium director of IFMIF DONES from CIEMAT, who will provide us a vision of IFMIF DONES and its development program. So thank you, Ángel, and the floor is yours. Ángel, I think we can't hear you.
You cannot hear me, neither you cannot see me. So I hope that
now it's perfect. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to explain to you what is the status of this project that we are promoting since a few years ago. In the activities that we are developing in relation with this project, there are involved people from a lot of institutions from 16 European countries, and the need of this facility. Let me check. Yes. The need for this facility is based, as has been explained by Tony Donnet in the first presentation, is linked with the fact that one of the key differences between ITER and demo is the number of neutrons that we will have in demo. In ITER, talking about the number of neutrons unit that has been mentioned before, in ITER we will have a number of neutrons that is proportional to the between 1 to 3 dPa in all the lifetime of the different components of the facility. In the case of demo, for the first wall, we can have between 15 to 20 dPa per year, and that means that the number of neutrons that we will have in demo is much higher. Besides this, the energy spectrum of these neutrons are different to the ones that we will have in fission reactors, and that means that we do not know too much, or we have some uncertainties on the behavior of these materials in the long term. And this is why the need of a facility in which we can test these materials has been identified, and it has been included as a relevant facility with high priority in the roadmap that has been explained by Tony Donnet in the first presentation. So what is IFMIF DONES? IFMIF DONES is a fusion-like neutron source that, as has been explained, is required for the qualification of materials to be used in the European demo reactor. It is built up based, it is not a plasma machine, it is not a tokamak, neither an accelerator. It is based on a accelerator, Neutron accelerator, in which we raise the energy of the neutron up to 40 MeV. This is not so difficult. It's a relatively low energy for accelerators, but taking into account that we want to have a lot of neutrons, we need a lot of deuterons, and that means that we target to have a very high current, 125 milliamps. These deuterons hit a lithium target, and taking into account the amount of power that we are depositing in this target, the lithium must be liquid in such a way that we are able to extract the heat from the heat that is deposited there. Then the stripping reaction between the deuteron and the lithium produce neutrons with a neutron spectra not exactly not exactly the same that we will have in a fusion reactor, but quite similar, and it is relatively the neutrons has more or less directional movement, and then the samples to be tested are located just in the back of the target. In this configuration, we are able to test samples. You will see later a little bit more in detail, up to 20 to 50 dPa in a relatively small volume, and to higher dPa per year in bigger volumes. We produce around 10 to 18 neutrons per second in a volume that is a few hundred cubic centimeters. This facility has been identified, as it has been mentioned by Belén, as a high priority one. Sorry, it has been also included in the ESPRI roadmap as a European strategic facility. The key challenges that are related with this facility is that we are in the limit of the technology for many of these components. In the case of the accelerator, we will have 40 MeV 125 milliamps. That means a power of 5 megawatt. That is a very high power. With due to the fact that we have a very high current, there is a high space charge effect, and that means that the technology of the accelerator components is really challenging. We want to operate in continuous wave, and that means that the availability of the components is a very high requirement, and many of the components of the accelerator are the most challenging that has been built up to now. And in fact, this is one of the reasons, as we will see later, why we are building a prototype of the low energy part of this accelerator in Rocasso to test that we are able to build and to manage an accelerator of this type. In the case of the lithium loop, we are planning to build the biggest lithium loop in the world, in which we need to manage a significant amount of power, and due to some risk related with the corrosion of the loop tubes, the impurity management in this liquid metal is one of the challenges that we have. Similarly, we also have the strong requirements related with availability and lifetime of the components. And in the case of the irradiation area, due to the activation of the components, remote handling is one of the key aspects. Remote handling feasibility for the maintenance activities in this area is one of the key challenging things, and long-term control and stability on the temperature control and so on. Taking into account that the facility that we are planning to build is a unique one, it is also of interest in other areas of the science and technology. We are doing a systematic effort to try to identify what are these other areas in which this facility can make significant contributions. You can see here some preliminary ideas. The experiments that can be developed in this facility are linked to two different types of experiments, if you want. First one is that we can use the neutrons after being used to irradiate the materials, the related materials. The neutrons are still there with relatively high energy and in a very high number, so we can use those neutrons to further develop other type of experiments. And the second alternative is to deviate a small fraction of the deuteron beam and to use this deuteron fraction to develop some specific experiments in which we can play with the fact that we have a very high current in the accelerator. Probably the most interesting applications are related with the production of radioisotopes, that it seems could be one of the key applications that could be of interest, and a number of experiments related with nuclear physics and basic physics studies. Well, now I would like to describe a little bit more in detail, each one of the key components of the facility, trying to emphasize what are the heat technologies that could be involved in the design and construction of these components. This will allow you to identify the type of companies that could be involved on this. First one is the accelerator system. You can see the accelerator is composed of a number of components going from in the low energy part, we have an injector. Then the particles are extracted, the deuterons are extracted with an energy of around 100 keV. Then they enter in a component that is called the RFQ, radio frequency quadrupole. It is a component mainly made with copper, in which is a very long resonant cavity in which the mechanical properties, the mechatronics of this component is one of the key aspects. Then we have a component that is called the medium energy beam transport section that takes the beam that has been accelerated up to 5 MeV and shapes it to be able to enter in the radio frequency LINAC. This is composed of a number of resonant cavities, superconducting resonant cavities that raise the energy of the particles from 5 MeV to 40 MeV. There are up to 50 resonant cavities. These cavities are grouped in cryomodules. We have 4 or 5 cryomodules, and then when the particles go out, we have the high energy beam transport section in which the beam is shaped from a Gaussian beam to a rectangular beam up to the target. All these components requires radio frequency heating, and taking into account that we have a lot of particles and we are raising the energy of these particles, the amount of power that is needed to feed all these different cavities is quite significant. The key characteristics of this accelerator is the frequency that is used to feed the cavities, that we work at 175 megahertz. It's relatively low compared with other present accelerators, but this is due because we want to be in the conservative side of the technology. We are managing 5 megawatts of power, high current, continuous operation, high availability, as I already mentioned. The key technologies that are involved in all these components are listed here. This is a preliminary list. We need radio frequency sources, resonant cavities, magnets, mechatronics of different materials, not the usual materials, cryogenic issues, vacuum, power supplies, cooling technologies, diagnostics, control systems, and so on. In the case of the lithium systems, the area in which, in the left part of the slide, you can see the area in which the deuterons interact with the lithium. The lithium is moving in the internal part of this gray part. The lithium moves at high velocity in a free surface movement because due to the relatively low energy of the deuterons, we cannot have a window in front of between the accelerator and the lithium surface. And then after passing through this target, the lithium enter in a quench tank. This quench tank normalizes the pressure and the flow of the lithium, and then the lithium moves in a lithium loop that you can see here in gray. In this figure, you can see in green. Okay, the lithium does not like too much the water, and then to reduce the risk of interaction of lithium with water, we have to oil intermediate loops in such a way that we have a heat exchanger here that is a heat exchanger lithium to oil. Then we have another heat exchanger oil, and then the third one is between oil and water. And with this complex configuration of intermediate loop, we are able to extract the heat from the loop from the lithium to the water, reducing the risk of contamination and interaction of lithium with water. Besides this, it is very important. Sorry, I go back. It's very important purification loop. This red loop in this red component in the lower part of the slide, in which we have a number of traps that allow us to control the quality, the impurity contents in the lithium. The key challenge, the key technologies involved in this area are liquid metals technologies, fluids, monitoring, purification, and so on. Lithium is okay. I would say not so common liquid metal, and it requires some specific technologies to be implemented. We have complex cooling loops, sensors and monitoring issues and technologies that need to be developed. Some of the components requires also remote maintenance and, of course, control both from the hardware and software point of view. The systems area is the area in which the interaction between the neutrons and the lithium takes place, and as a consequence, the area in which it is located. The samples to be irradiated. Due to the high number of neutrons, all this area needs to be confined in a concrete block in such a way that there are no radiation risks outside this block. But of course, this block requires a lot of input and output for cooling and for electrical feeding and control purposes, and that means that the technology related with all these aspects is quite complex. Besides this, during maintenance, this concrete block needs to be open and it must be accessible for remote handling. The samples are located in components that we call modules, irradiation modules. Here you can see a sketch of one irradiation module. I assume, or we assume, that each one of these, each irradiation campaign will require a different irradiation module, but we are working today mainly in one, that is the one that will be required during the first years. This is an irradiation module that allows the irradiation of a structural materials candidate, mainly EUROFusion material, and in different temperatures range from 250 to 550 in very well controlled conditions of temperature. The samples are located in the lower part of this module. I'm not sure if you are able to see the mood. In the lower part of this irradiation module, occupying a relatively small volume. We use small samples. Around 100 samples are located in a box, more or less like a cigarette box. This box has a system to control temperature in an independent way, and then an array of around 12 of these boxes are put in front of the neutron flags, and they stay there for during 1 or 2 years. That is the time that it will be required for the experiment. All the rest of the module is used to allow the control of the different sensors and monitoring, and to maintain the electrical connection far enough from the irradiation area, and to be able to cool these cigarette boxes in such a way that we can control the temperature. All the main involved technologies in this area are listed here. This is one key aspect is that inside this box it is required fan cooling, because of course there are a lot of neutrons, and that means there will be some heat deposition also, and to reduce the risk of interaction of water with lithium, all the cooling inside this box is made with helium. So we have a requirement of helium cooling, and also in the internals of this concrete box. And also we operate in controlled atmosphere to reduce the risk related with the presence of lithium. as I mentioned before, also remote maintenance in this area is a key aspect. I have mentioned several times remote maintenance. There are quite a lot of remote maintenance requirements in different aspects, in different areas of the facility, but probably the most relevant one is the maintenance related with this concrete block that I was mentioning before. This box is located in this figure. This box is located in the lower part of the figure, and in top of this, in top of it, we have a room in which we have a couple of big cranes that are used to be able to do the maintenance during the maintenance period when there is no irradiation, and then we can open this concrete box and we are able to manage the internals of it to prepare the new experiment and to recover the samples that have been already irradiated. The remote maintenance activities are relatively unusual, and it is required some special cranes, telemanipulators, the development of some remote handling tools, radiation monitoring, and all these kind of things related with maintenance. We should not forget what we call conventional systems that are not conventional at all the systems that are needed to be sure that these three areas that I have mentioned are able to work properly. That means cooling systems, electrical systems, HVAC, nuclear and conventional one, and so on and so on. More or less half of the budget of the facility will go to these buildings and conventional systems. And besides this, we should not forget also what we call transversal activities. That is, all the work that is needed to be developed is not manufacturing components, but a lot of work is needed to control the plant in a proper way, including activities related with maintenance, safety, security, control, and so on and so on. Just to give you a list of the technologies involved in this aspect, you can see in this slide, this is buildings, nuclear or radioactive buildings, design, cooling, HVAC, gas management, electronics, maintenance, and so on. As it has been already explained, the need of this facility has been identified some time ago, and in the last 15 years, there are a number of projects that has been working in pushing for this facility. Probably the most important one is the one that has been already mentioned by Tony Donnet this morning, is the IFMI-FEBEDA one. This is focused on engineering validation activities, and during the last 15 years, a number of prototypes has been built to demonstrate that the conceptual design of this facility is feasible. In the last 5 years, we have been working in the framework of the EUROFusion consortium. There is a work package focused on this, in which we are developing the engineering design, the detailed engineering design of the facility in such a way that we are more or less ready to start the construction phase as soon as a final agreement on the start of the project is ready. During the last 2 years, it has been developed the so-called preparatory phase, that it has been an activity focused the preparation for the governance of the project and how these type of activities can be managed. And finally, in the last 2 or 3 years, there are a couple of significant Spanish-funded projects that are being run that I want to mention, especially because you will see later that are the ones that will put some contracts in short term. Just to give you an idea, we have, of course, studied the schedule, the planning. We have made the planning of how we can build this facility and how we can operate it. You can see here more or less a high-level schedule of it. It has been developed in quite detail, in quite good detail. You can see that the construction of the facility will take around 10 or 11 years. Based on this, we were able to identify the critical path milestones. This is very important because, of course, this identification guides the design effort. And you can see here a sketch of this critical path. For me, it is important to emphasize that even knowing that this is something that is needed as soon as possible, it will be difficult to get results very fast. So, as I mentioned, we will need around 10 to 11 years to build the facility. besides this, we will need at least 1 or 2 years to run one experiment, and I assume we will need a few experiments along the time. Once that the experiment is completed, we will need 1 or 2 years to analyze the sample that has been irradiated, the post-irradiation analysis of the irradiated samples is not an easy task. That means that if we are lucky and things goes very well, we need around 15 years to be able to produce the first data on these materials. And of course, this first data will not be enough. So this is why we usually say that, at least from our point of view, this facility is in the critical path. It is also in the critical path for them. I will not go into the details of different projects. I just want to emphasize the main work that we are developing with these Spanish-funded projects that I mentioned, because in these projects we have some budget available to start some activities on site, and it is planned to issue a number of contracts in the short term, a number of contracts to develop some activities related with the facility. The work that we are trying to develop in this framework is full detailed characterization of the site. We have already issued some contracts related with this. Another 1 or 2 are planned for next year. We are planning also to build some auxiliary buildings. A couple of calls are planned before the end of the year or beginning of the next one. In fact, I think that right now a call has been issued to make the design of one of these buildings. The call is right now open, and it is planned to be implemented middle of the next year. And another call is being prepared for the construction of 3 other more buildings. We have started what we call a project office in the place, and some training programs. And besides this, we are also planning to build up a number of prototypes and medium-sized facilities. A number of contracts or calls will be issued around end of this year or beginning of the next one for, I think that at least 3 or 4 of them related with the construction of prototypes of some of the components that I have already mentioned. So in summary, materials with emphasis in irradiation effects is one of the key pending issues in the development of fusion as an energy source. Milestones is the EU proposed fusion-like neutron source to be implemented in the near future in Granada. This facility is based on a high current accelerator in a liquid lithium target, and it will allow to develop experiments to irradiate around 1,000 engineering relevant samples in each experiment at a dose rate higher than 10 dBA per full power operation year. And the engineering design has been developed during the last 5 years, and we are ready now to enter in the construction phase. The design of the facility is flexible enough to accommodate different radiation needs that will evolve along the time. And the message that I will try to give to you is that the project is progressing properly, gaining momentum, international consensus, and technical readiness. And a formal start of the project is urgently needed, and it is hope it will come in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Angel, for illustrating us on DONE's future plans. This is really a fascinating project. Industry will indeed be a very big driver, and of course, all of us expect to have DONE's built in Granada in the coming years. So now, last but not least, we are delighted to count on the vision of Tokamak Energy, one of the most innovative companies pioneering commercial fusion energy, founded in 2009 as a spin-off from the Coolant Center for Fusion Energy. Tokamak Energy will give us a different vision with future developments out of ITER and the European roadmap. So it's a pleasure to introduce you David Kingham, the Executive Vice Chairman of Tokamak Energy. David, when you want.
Thank you very much, Belen. I think I will give an overview of Tokamak Energy and our plans. I think in practice they are quite complementary to ITER and the EUROFusion and IFMIF Donez. I think fusion is absolutely a huge challenge, which needs many different approaches, many different parallel paths of technology development. And in my view, it needs much more private funding to come in. And that, I believe, will accelerate overall progress and will cause government funding of fusion to increase very rapidly. And from our perspective, we think achieving short-term milestones is particularly important to private investors. And to take that a little bit further, I think we will see in the next year or two that the amount of private investment in fusion energy in the US will start to exceed the amount of public funding of fusion energy in the US. And this, I think, will cause a rapid increase in overall investment in fusion. So the timescales we're all facing are extremely long, but that is partly constrained by rather low funding of fusion internationally at the moment. We're talking perhaps $3 or $4 billion a year total expenditure on fusion energy. And that number needs to increase very substantially in order to deliver fusion energy on an important timescale. To give you an idea of Tokamak Energy, we've raised about $160 million of private investment so far. We employ 180 people, so the business has grown significantly over the last 10 years. And our goal, along with others, is to unlock the prize of fusion energy. So it's a prize for the world, a prize for all the researchers who contribute, and it's a prize for private investors who own some of the technology which will go into the commercial solutions for fusion energy. And from our perspective, there are two technologies which can help to really accelerate commercial fusion energy. One of them is the spherical tokamak, so the compressed version of the conventional tokamak, such as JET and ITER. And the idea is that by compressing the device, operating at lower aspect ratio, there are some improvements in the performance of the plasma, which can achieve high power output from relatively compact devices. Now, of course, this creates huge engineering challenges, which will need to be solved in order to have devices that, in our view, can be smaller than ITER and commercially viable as fusion power plants. Not everybody shares that view, of course, but some diversity of thinking, I think, can be very valuable. So I would describe our approach as quite close to the scientific mainstream thinking in fusion energy development. We certainly view tokamak devices as being proven to be far superior to any other device type for fusion energy development. But we do favor this spherical tokamak shape for the physics advantages which we think it can give. We also have taken the view that high temperature superconducting magnets made from rare earth barium copper oxide high temperature superconductor have such huge advantages compared to low temperature superconductor that they are going to be an essential component of a commercial fusion power plant. Now, again, not to underestimate the challenges here, this is a relatively new material, relatively new manufacturing techniques to make the material, and our job at Tokamak Energy has been to develop very high performance but still quite compact magnets from this new material to prove at small scale that the materials can indeed make very powerful magnets. So why are we concentrating on these two technologies? I won't go into huge detail here, but colleagues are actually presenting this week at the Plasma Physics Conference of American Physical Society and going into much more detail about the physics results that we've achieved on our ST40 device, and also reporting on simulations we've done of how that device can perform in future. But basically, we like spherical tokamaks because they can deliver higher plasma pressure for a given magnetic field than conventional tokamaks. We believe, we need to do further things to prove it, we believe they can have enhanced stability and reduced risk from ELMs, and they can demonstrate very high bootstrap fraction. So this is self-driven plasma current. And the reason for that being exciting is we want to minimize power input to future fusion power plants. And one way of doing that is to reduce the amount of energy required to drive plasma current. And then we have the high temperature superconductors. So existing low temperature superconductors do require cooling to 4 degrees Kelvin or lower, and they have they do lose conductivity as the magnetic fields increase. So field strengths above 10 or 12 Tesla are very difficult to achieve with conventional low temperature superconductors. In small magnets that can be done, but in large magnet systems, something like the 12 Tesla that ITER is designed to deliver is about the maximum that can be expected. But the high temperature superconductors have quite different properties of high conductivity, even in very strong magnetic fields. And so this is particularly why we favor their use. And they're much easier to cool. We typically operate our high temperature superconducting magnets at around 20 Kelvin, which gives at least a factor of 5 reduction in cooling power, and in practice more like a factor of 10. So highly desirable but relatively immature technology compared to the conventional low temperature superconductor. But again, this is part of our point that there have to be some radical innovations in pursuit of fusion energy, in addition to the main efforts towards incremental improvements in existing understanding, existing technologies. There is scope for radical innovation within schemes such as European Fusion Roadmap and other roadmap type approaches to development of fusion energy. So the key features here for high temperature superconducting magnets, it's really this very high magnetic field and reduced cost of cooling, and we've been able to make very compact magnets. And we've certainly patented a lot of techniques for making the magnets, and that's important to our private investors, of course. And we can also see some very interesting spin-off applications. And as I think many people will appreciate, in pursuit of a huge and challenging goal, such as fusion energy, there will be these very interesting spin-offs, many of which have quite short-term and valuable applications. I mentioned that we use the rare earth barium copper oxide high temperature superconductor, sometimes referred to as second generation high temperature superconductor. It's a very interesting multi-layered material with copper, a substrate, typically a steel or hastelloy substrate, and a very thin layer of rare earth barium copper oxide, something like 1 micron thick in a tape that is 100 microns thick and about 12 millimeters wide. And that tape can carry thousands of amps if cooled to around 20 Kelvin. So we set out several years ago with an objective of building a 20 Tesla test magnet at small scale to prove that the material was strong enough to withstand the magnetic field and could be cooled to produce the magnetic field. And we overachieved as we developed that technology. So we've gained a lot of confidence that these magnets work really well. So let me turn now to people we work with. We're very much open to collaboration. We do like programs like the INFUSE program that US Department of Energy has. That's enabled us to work, for example, with Princeton, Los Alamos, and Oak Ridge, and so that they are undertaking projects that we have defined, but which are clearly of mutual interest. We would like to see better mechanisms for European collaborations, but we do, I shouldn't downplay that, we do have a lot of European collaborations in practice. And we develop prototypes. So we built 2 small tokamaks. The first we built with simple copper magnets. It's now the North Tokamak in Denmark at Danish Technological University. We're very pleased to see it being used there very effectively. In 2015, we built another very small tokamak with high temperature superconducting magnets for the first time to prove that that technology would work at small scale. And that's now a museum piece. It was in the Science Museum in London for a while, and then in a display about the sun and the importance of the sun for energy supply on Earth. And then in 2017, we unveiled our high field spherical tokamak, the ST40, and we started developing more powerful high temperature superconducting magnets. And those magnets have gone on to 24 Tesla and indeed 26 Tesla when tested at CERN. The ST40, meanwhile, has achieved plasma temperatures of greater than 15 million degrees. And just this week, colleagues at the American Physical Society will be revealing some provisional data showing plasma temperatures in excess of 5 keV, 55 to 60 million degrees, and rather higher. So this is getting to be very exciting plasma temperature in a relatively compact spherical tokamak. ST40 is 40 centimeter major radius device with a maximum designed magnetic field of 3 Tesla at the major radius. So much higher field strength and much more compact than other previous spherical tokamaks. And we're now proving that it can achieve these very high plasma temperatures. This is a bit more detail of the ST40. We do have a very advanced diagnostic set. We are quite open to collaboration on diagnostics as the device is really getting very interesting results at the moment. And that's a top-down view of ST40, and then an inside view showing a new diverter that we installed about a year ago so that we can get to really high heat loads in the diverter. And we think this, again, is an area of potentially interesting collaboration because our approach to diverters is somewhat different to others. We're aiming to actually try to get very high heat loads and to deal with those heat loads. In the longer term, we're thinking of lithium flowing systems on diverters. So we think that the ST40 device can be a valuable research facility in the longer term, as well as proving the points we need to prove on the physics of spherical tokamaks. I mentioned that we have significant diagnostic set on ST40. We're trying to measure temperatures up to and perhaps above 100 million degrees. And this, of course, is extremely challenging for plasma measurements. But we do have some good collaborations, particularly with Princeton and Oak Ridge, funded by US Department of Energy, which helps us with the physics and the diagnostics. And we have our own strong team now of diagnosticians. And we are recruiting in this area, as plasma diagnostics is very challenging, demanding, and exciting. We have a great team. We'd like to expand it. On the magnet development, as I mentioned, we've demonstrated a high temperature superconducting magnet with a field strength, field on coil of 24 Tesla at 20 Kelvin operating temperature. We're now developing a much larger high temperature superconducting magnet set that will be manufactured over the next year and tested late 22 into 2023. And it's a full set of 14 toroidal field coils and 2 poloidal field coils. So we'll be able to test the interaction between the different coils in the device. And we do see some commercialization opportunities, some spin-out opportunities, most obviously from high temperature superconducting magnets. So, for example, we've licensed our magnet technology to the Paul Scherrer Institute in Switzerland, and they're using it to develop magnets for their synchrotron light source. We're also looking at space applications of the high temperature superconducting magnets. They have good properties for space deployment. They're compact, lightweight, relatively easy to cool, very robust. and interestingly scalable for some space propulsion applications. We are privately funded. We have to file patents as we go and protect some things with trade secrets. And we're trying to identify what we think will be the most valuable components, the most valuable innovations in future fusion power plants, and to own or co-own some of the solutions. So we see fusion really as, from an investor perspective, it's a disruptive game changer that could transform the future of energy in the very long term. And if we can deliver it quickly, it can transform prospects for decarbonisation even in the next 2 or 3 decades. We're one of the leaders in the race for commercial fusion, very much aligned with the proven physics approach to commercial fusion, focused certainly on high temperature superconducting magnets, building up a significant team. We're privately funded, so we're quite agile in the sense that we can change our plans relatively quickly, depending on the evidence and the availability of private funding. And we have these interesting near-term spin-out options, particularly for our magnet technology. So our view is we're helping to develop the fusion power plant of tomorrow and commercializing some of the technology applications today. Thank you.
David, thank you very much for taking us through the different technologies that Tokamak Energy is developing, in particular the ones for spherical tokamaks and high temperature superconducting magnets. Thanks a lot for identifying potential areas of collaboration. Very impressive presentation. Now we move to the roundtable that will be moderated by my colleague Soren Koolsholm, the Danish ILO for ITER, and chair of the Fusion ILO's network. So Soren, when you want.
Yes, thank you, Berlin. May I encourage the if Engel will also open his camera so we can all be in this roundtable. Thank you. And I'll also start thanking all of you for very interesting presentations that I think gave a quite comprehensive view and also on different perspectives and of the efforts that we are doing in Europe to realize fusion energy. And of course, there's a roadmap which we'll get back to, and there's a long timeline. And just a personal remark that sometimes I'm being approached and people are a bit impatient, but we should remember that it's only 100 years ago that we understood what's happening in the sun. And now we are almost ready to build it. So it's not a modest endeavor. It is very, very ambitious. And it's something that, as has also been presented, also in the end by you, David, that's something that can change the world. We strongly believe, I think, all of us, that it's worth the effort, but that's quite some effort. And as part of that effort, we also want to involve industry, because industry is crucial to realizing the ideas and designs that we come up with. So I think that this will be, of course, the focus of our round table. And I've received some questions, and I'll start from one end, and this is for questions for you, Tony. Regarding the industrial opportunities with EUROFusion. So is there a website, is there a portal, the question says, where these industrial opportunities can be found?
Well, at this moment, I must confess we don't have it, and there's a number of reasons for that. The the European rules which are imposed on EUROFusion don't make working with industry very easy. And so we basically, our main partners are the 30 national laboratories in the 28 countries. When we want to involve industry, we first need to send out a call to the laboratories to see whether they want to propose industries in their country. And then once they have proposed, we can send a call to the industries. But ultimately, the industries need to work via the labs, which then need to pre-finance the work, because often the industry wants to be paid directly, whereas the European Commission pays us deliverable-based at the end of the year. So this is not very useful. To work in a more flexible way, we set up an industrial framework contract with the European Commission. I mentioned that, which is in principle coordinated by 3 companies, Empresarios Agrupados in Spain, Ansaldo Nucleare in Italy, and Framatome in Germany. And whenever we have a need for industrial competence, we send out a call via this triumvirate of 3 industries. Of course, they will look whether they can do it themselves, but they also put out calls to elsewhere. We are talking with the European Commission and also Fusion for Energy to improve that. I had yesterday a meeting with the Commission and FRE on this. And the idea there is that we now set up a working group to make that more fluent. So ideally, I would say if we have a call in EUROFusion, we should use the FRE web portal, because FRE is completely geared up to work with industry. This could be an idea to do that, but of course, there's many kind of administrative things we need to sort out, and it's not directly easy, but we're working on it to make it, let's say, more transparent and also more easy for industry to see our calls.
Thank you. It sounds good also to, as you say, that you have the effort to integrate the involvement of industry via the FRE portal. And maybe I'll have a question now for Leonardo and Victor. It was actually asked at your during your presentation, Tony, but I think that maybe the experience with the fission industry. So how can the question is, how can the experience of the fission industry, how is that affecting and helping the development of fusion energy and in the fusion tendering? And I know this is something that you have a lot of experience with in the fusion for energy tenders.
I take this question, Soren. So thank you for the person who asked this question. It's a very important point. Now, a fusion machine in the scale as ITER is, I mean, a large-scale fusion machine is a nuclear facility. It's understood as a nuclear facility in France, but also it would be understood as such in all the member states, in most countries probably. This means that when building such a large facility, we have to comply with the requirements put forward by the relevant nuclear regulator. Again, in the case of ITER, this is the French nuclear regulator. The standards and the processes which are applied by the nuclear regulators are those coming from the fission industry. So there is no nuclear safety standard developed for fusion. This means that we apply fission standards suitably adapted, but still at their core, fission standards. For this reason, and this is clearly visible in the calls for tender, which we publish in particular for nuclear components, companies having experience on nuclear projects, which means usually fission nuclear projects, are extremely valuable. And we are very happy when we see these companies appearing, because it means that they need less time to develop their own internal processes in a way to be compliant with the regulators' requirements. On the other hand, we also see that this is very often a restrictive effect on the possibilities for companies having a lot to contribute, but not having this type of nuclear experience. So it's always a bit of a challenge. On one hand, we need this type of skills, but on the other hand, we would also like somehow to extend the participation beyond these skills. One way, and this has been discussed many times, and at a certain moment in the future, we will have to put it on the table of our stakeholders and do something about this. One way could be to accelerate the development of safety standards which are fusion specific. There are some political concerns about this topic, so it's not necessarily going to be an easy discussion. But if we want to move forward then with plants, machines such as demo, it is absolutely essential that we will develop and apply tailored standards, not standards coming from some other application. It's very inefficient to use standards developed for other purposes and then trying to squeeze fusion into this. I think probably Tony also has some comment in this respect, because it's been a topic which was discussed in EUROFusion as well.
I completely agree with what you say, Leonardo. We are also looking into that, and of course there's a lot of work being done now. I would say that especially the UK is now very active in looking into the nuclear legislation, and I think it's important to realize that fusion will be much safer than nuclear fission, and that some of the nuclear fission standards, they are much too restrictive for fusion. So we need, together with the legislators, to develop a new legislation network, legislation for fusion, and this is something we need to do in the coming decade, I would say. Because that's very important.
Yeah, as a side remark on that, I guess that would, of course, also affect the construction of demo and the framework for that. So I agree that we have a lot of questions coming in now. There's just one from before. Oh, actually, two questions that was made on the during the presentation. So one is for you, Angel, and that is, how can a company be involved in the IFMIF donors project? And do you have a tendering portal, and if you don't, in the future, will you be tendering via Fusion for Energy portal or on a separate portal?
Well, I mean, first of all, we already have some companies involved in the project. I mean, a lot of the engineering work has been made with some companies through the EUROFusion framework and through this framework contract that has been mentioned by Tony several times. And there are also other companies involved in relatively small contracts. But I mean, the problem that we have is that we still do not have a formal project, if you want. So what we are, the contracts that are being issued are issued through the different portals, if you want, of the different institutions that are involved. So for example, the contracts that I mentioned in my presentation will be issued through the portal, through the system of the CIEMAT and through the system of the Granada University, because they get the money to do this work. Some other contracts, for example, in the framework of EUROFusion activities, are being issued by different countries, and each one has, let's say, his own system. So what we are trying to do to try to diffuse out information in a more or less easier way is that we have our webpage, that is ifmifdones.org. And in this web page, we try to put as a news, we try to put the links to the different contracts that we are aware of. So as soon as we get information of a call or something that is going out, we put a link there just for information. Of course, it's not an official portal, but we try to put all the news that we have in this place. Besides this, we have included also in this web page a specific area in which the companies can put their name and their area of expertise in such a way that we are trying to build a database of interested companies. And then when we have some need or we identify some new topic that needs to be addressed in collaboration with a company, we look to this database to do preliminary contacts and to get information. So it is still not a formal portal, but we try to put together all the information that we can find, if you want, or we can develop in this ifmirdones.org webpage.
Thank you for that. So that is definitely a good place to keep an eye out for the companies interested. Yeah, I have to see again. There's a lot of comments here, but there's a question here for Tokamak Energy. What is the approach when investigating the activation issues in materials close to the plasma?
Yes, I should explain that at the moment we simply use hydrogen plasma, so just protons. So we have neutral beams firing into a hydrogen plasma. We are planning to operate with deuterium at some stage, and there would be different steps in doing that. One would be firing deuterium neutral beams into a hydrogen plasma, and then beyond that, deuterium into deuterium plasma. At that stage, we would start to get some fusion reactions, and there would start to be some activation of material. But we're operating with quite short plasma pulses, perhaps flat top of 100 or 200 milliseconds. There won't be a large amount of activation. We do, of course, have all the monitoring necessary for any radiation that comes inside or outside the bioshield that we have, and we would have active monitoring of any activation. And of course, we do the calculations to work out what activation is expected. We haven't really gone as far as thinking we could deliberately expose some materials to benefit from the fusion neutron flux, but that might be of interest in the longer term.
Yep, thank you for that. Now there's some two groups of questions that I would like to address now. This is one relating to SMEs, and then after that there's another group of questions relating to the public versus private efforts, and I think that at least for the latter one, I'm sure all of you have some input on the SMEs. I'll just read up a couple of questions since they are somehow connected. So there's a question here saying, what are the expectation for the involvement of highly skilled SMEs in the coming demo, R&D, and industrial activities? And this is first a question to Tony. But before answering, I'll just read another related question. And that is, what is the strategy of ITER and F4E? And you can also say EUROFusion, to keep the knowledge in SMEs until 2040. And I believe the 2040 is probably relating to the construction of demo. So I think, Tony, if you want to address this, and then I propose that Leonardo and Victor can also comment on this afterwards.
Thank you, Søren, and thank you to the people who raised these very, very important and very good questions. We do think that it's very important that industry is involved in the conceptual design of demo already. We have learned from ITER that if you don't do that, you end up in fantastic designs. We have in our research institutes the best engineers in the world. But there's one thing they usually don't think about is how to manufacture what they design. And so what we have seen in ITER is that sometimes, let's say, design we're giving to industry, and industry has, let's say, a very huge problem in adapting the design to something they can manufacture. So for this reason, I think it's very important. We also see, and I think this is also coming from the European rules at the moment, that a company which is involved in the pre-design or the design of a component needs to be ruled out for the tendering for the actual manufacturing. And of course, this is very bad, because then many companies are not eager to jump during the design phase onto, let's say, working with us to make the design for demo if later they cannot tender. So we need to learn from things which have developed during ITER and do it better for demos. So we need to have a system where companies which are involved in the early designs are not ruled out from tendering during later phases. Now, I do think that gradually industry will be more and more involved in the demo design. So at the moment, it's very much an action task, because we're doing the design. We need competences in very different areas where we're already working with industry. But towards the end of this century, the end of this decade, when you could say that ITER is more or less coming to completion, we are entering the phase of the more detailed engineering design, and then industry should be more and more involved. So we really want to keep the knowledge which the industries have, and also including the SMEs, of course, in the system and to benefit from that. So we need a system where we have a kind of healthy partnership, I would say, between the industry and the research organizations in order to prepare for the future. We cannot go, ITER cannot, the industry cannot be just a provider of components. They really need to partner with us. And the way is to do that in a very transparent and open way. And for this, we need to change some things.
Yeah, I fully agree with you, Tony. Just one addition from my side is that the challenge, when I agree on what you've said, and also the involvement of industry and greater involvement, but for the particular case of SMEs, so if you have a very innovative SME with a particular skill, it is a challenge that, depending on the level, the area that they're working in, how, if they have a very key competence to fusion and help on building ITER, then there's a long path until their expertise will be needed again for demo. So,
well, I think if the expertise can already be incorporated in design in one or the other way, I mentioned this mission 7 to go for costs, lowering the cost by concept improvement. So if there's industries with fantastic ideas which could lower the costs, we need to bring it in. And so we need to work with these industries, which still means that in the coming 7-8 years where we are working on the design, we're not ordering these components from the industry, but they could help us in incorporating these ideas in the design. So yeah, I hope this answers.
Yeah, thank you. And then Leonardo, do you have a supplementary comment on the involvement of SMEs and maintaining the expertise in the industry?
This is one of the challenges, but as you've seen, it has been already acknowledged, and it is part of our mandate. There are several measures, there are several ways in which we can try to pursue this engagement and to maintain, to preserve this engagement. In the end, it's not only about the engagement, it's the preservation of know-how, it's the preservation of technologies, because if you do not provide an environment in which this know-how is continuously utilized, it becomes, well, both obsolete or just evaporates relatively quickly, definitely more quickly than the time scale we are looking now at for the development of new future fusion machines. One way in which we're doing this, and as you know, Soren was part of the original let's say strategy or motivation for having BSBF, is looking for synergies with other big science facilities. So I was very happy, for instance, to see from Tokamak Energy the fact that they were already able to, let's say, license to use their technology on another big science facility, because that's probably the most immediate way in which we can provide the continuity to both small and large companies. The issue is not significantly different. Both small and large companies need continuity in the different areas. There is a lot we have to do in order to create this single big science market, which is the foundation of the idea for BSBF. And in particular, one of the things we need to try to discuss with other big science facilities is to reach as much as possible an alignment on which technologies will be used in the different installations over the next 25 years. Because clearly, if our superconducting technology, the one which is chosen for fusion, is different from the one which is chosen for particle accelerators, the synergies will be very difficult. But if we can find a way to find a solution which is good enough for both communities, then we will have quite a stable stream of opportunities which can be sustaining certain technologies. And this is clearly work to be done on our side. A bit more in the future, but already present in some of the discussions we're having with our stakeholders and also between FRE and EUROFusion, is the fact that at a certain point we will need to set up some technological, let's call them, generally speaking, technological programs, which means both technology development for those technologies which need to become more mature in view of application to demo, but there would be technology preservation programs for those technologies which are already mature enough and just need to be preserved and to be kept available for the future. For the moment, this is not part of our mandate. Saying it more directly, we do not have the money. We were not given the money for doing this, and neither EUROFusion has, but this is clearly something which will need to be addressed, because if you take, for instance, magnets, today we're speaking a lot about magnets. The ITER magnets, we will deliver the last one in 2023. That's going to be the end of 2022 or 2023. That's the last delivery for ITER. Then there's no more magnet activity or large magnet activity in ITER, and there will not be any large magnet activity for many decades in the fusion world. And that's something we need to preserve. We need first to capture what is important, the skills, the know-how which was developed from ITER. To me, this is absolutely essential. I keep repeating these, and I know that Tony agrees. The deliverable for ITER is not only the item itself. The item is half of the deliverable. The other half is the know-how which was gained, which has to be captured in the same way as the deliverable and has to be delivered to the next generation. So all of this is part of what we're thinking about and discussing. At a certain point, I'm sure it will come. We'll try to have it coming sooner rather than later. In the meanwhile, events such as BSBF are the best way to create these synergies and to support.
If I can say something more on this,
yep.
I think that I fully agree with what has been said up to now, but we need to explain also to the companies that they need to put effort or interest in some areas, even if the revenues are small during some years, because let's say the maturation time for these facilities usually is very long. So, and the companies need to be interested in these technologies during a lot of time without too many revenues, I would say, or too high revenues. There will be during long time, there are small contracts going on, small activities, but if they want to be familiar with the technology, they need to be involved even in these small things. Because only, let's say, when the big thing comes in, they need to have some expertise. And the only way to have this expertise is to be involved in small activities along the time. Sometimes it's not so easy to convince the companies to be involved in small activities. And I think this message is also very important. They must be interested, they must maintain some activity in the different areas in which they are interested, even if there are not too much activity in the area. I'm not asking for losses, but at least during many years, maybe they will not get big revenue from some activities.
Thank you for that. It may require some patience and yes. To stay or to participate, but also I think it's also an important point by Leonardo that now the attempt to make more visible the European big science market, that will also help that you can, the experience you have from one facility can also help in participating in another facility.
Yeah, Soren, if I may add one thing, I think Tokamak Energy is an excellent example of, I would call this good practice. Because I was very interested to follow your presentation, David, because I see the long-term goal, but I see that you have short-term fruits which you try to pick as you move in that direction. And this makes the whole package sustainable, because I think as you're a private company, it would be difficult to convince your investors to wait, until 2045 in order to get returns. So there are these short-term returns which keep things running while you move in the direction of the final goal. But it also means, so I like your approach. It also means that we have somehow, as let's say the public side of this equation, we have to consider what we're doing, because we have to make it possible for you to follow this approach. So we have to look carefully at which superconducting technologies you are using, because you are identifying superconducting technologies which are useful in the long term, but economically sustainable because they have some short-term applications so that the whole stream can be supported. So I think it's something which we probably need to be really as much as possible in contact to move together, because that's the way to go. Over such long time spans, that's probably the way to go.
Thank you very much, Leonardo. That's a very important perspective from Tokamak Energy, that there could be partners who would help us to develop our technology and would subject it to tests of, can it really deliver what's required for the longer term. We've had very good experience of working with CERN, and that has helped us with the modeling software that we use for design of these magnets, and they also were able to help us with a test. But that's quite small scale help, and we probably need to look at ways to scale up the interaction around proving out that these high temperature superconducting magnets can make a big difference.
And this is a very good introduction to the next topic I wanted to go into, looking at the questions. This is the private effort versus the public effort. And there's one question saying, are the new private initiatives on fusion putting pressure on talent availability for ITER and national labs? That's one question. And another one is Europe open to flexibility in the fusion roadmap to account for technology breakthroughs such as general fusion and MR2's smaller superconductor tokamak? This is the question. One could also add here the more powerful magnets, superconducting magnets of Tokamak Energy. And we did address this, but maybe well, before I think that I'll just take one opportunity here now that I'm sitting 20 meters from the former ST-25 that is now north, and it's a very, very popular tokamak, both for our students, educating the demo generation that Leonardo called it during the inauguration. So the new students that will be ready for the exploitation of construction of demo. but also it's also good for introducing our fellow scientists to the field of fusion. So it's also an entry. So this is a privately built tokamak that is now helping Danish universities form and prepare for involvement in EUROFusion. So I think that's a good example where private and public is, in that respect, collaborating. So having said that, the view on maybe I'll start with you, David. How do you see you as competitors to the public effort, or how do you see this?
Well, we should try to be complementary, I think. As a private company, we don't want to do things which are best done in government laboratories in publicly funded programs. We want to essentially spot the innovations that we think can make a difference. So we are interested in the innovations that can accelerate development of fusion. We will select some from time to time. Not all of them will work as we hope. But we will have pressure from investors to try hard quickly. The phrase used in the US is fail fast. I come up with an idea, see if it works, try it at small scale. If it works, then invest much more. If it doesn't, then try something else. And to us, that makes sense in the framework of projects such as JET, ITER, DEMO, that lay out a deliverable path to fusion energy. So this, to me, is extremely important. I'm a great believer in tokamak and spherical tokamak devices as being fundamentally the way forward for fusion energy. I'm prepared to accept that stellarators might also be pretty good. Beyond that, I think the scientific basis is too weak to support much investment in other device types with the goal of fusion energy. So I like the roadmap approach, the laying out of the challenges, and what I'm keen to do is to overlay on top of that some innovations that can accelerate the whole program. So it's great to see, as Tony was saying, that idea of innovations affecting the program is now coming into the roadmaps as an explicit part of a roadmap. That's really interesting. I think that's starting to shape up the optimum way for private companies to engage and bring private investment into fusion energy rather than private companies as suppliers to government.
Thank you, Dave, for that. Tony, I believe you want to continue here.
Yeah, I fully agree with what David says. And as I explained, we already have this mission 7, which is looking at new innovations and especially disruptive innovations, which can have an effect. I must say that the roadmap also had a completely different effect. Before we had a roadmap, so before EUROFusion essentially, in Europe, each laboratory had its own research, and there was not a strong guidance. So everyone tried to challenge, tackle the challenges for fusion. Everyone tries to tackle those challenges which gave the most interesting papers, which have the highest scientific impact, and there were gaps. So the roadmap has helped to already focus the research much more on the priorities. Also, what is helping to, at some point, you need to take decisions to drop a technology if you really have the feeling this is going nowhere, or we need to invest a lot of more money before this will become feasible. So in that sense, also the public research has become already a little bit more industrial. So we still work on some fallback solutions. I mentioned the stellarator as an important one. But also in heating and current drive, for instance, we are looking now whether we can power demo with ECRH only, because that's much more simple than the neutral beams, which are bulky, which need a lot of remote maintenance, and are problematic areas, or ion cyclotron heating, which scientifically seen is very interesting. But where still the problem is, can we couple the power properly into the plasma? And so we try to simplify there. We don't completely close the other lines, but at least we try to focus the research. So I think it's a very important tension. I personally see the relation between public and private as a very good one. So I think and we need to benefit much more. And I see that there also in the United States, there's a completely different philosophy than in Europe, where in the United States, even DOE is funding these private initiatives with additional public money. Whereas in Europe, we are always looking for, let's say, mutual benefit. So whenever we set up a collaboration, whether it's with Tokamak Energy or any other company, or with international partners like China and Japan, we always try to look for mutual benefit overall. And this is not always easy. And so we need to find a good way to work together. But I think in general, it's good to have both.
Thank you, Tony. And David, for your comments on this. I think there's a couple of questions now that I just want to, I think we also need to finish very, very soon. But I think that I'll ask this to Fusion for Energy, Leonardo and Victor, that it may happen that the implementation of some technologies will require the development of new manufacturing techniques or capabilities by the industry. Are there any plans to help manufacturing companies to adapt their capabilities to fusion needs? And then there's also a related question in the panel's view. Do you feel that industry is gearing up, upskilling, investing sufficiently to be able to add more value to fusion projects from a commercial perspective, which may help accelerate progress? Or does industry still take an ad hoc ITT-driven approach to their bids? So I think that relating to this, I don't know, Leonardo, if you want to.
Maybe Victor probably should start with the first part, and then I will answer the second. Victor, is that okay?
About the development of new technologies for the manufacturing?
Yeah, or competences, upgrading competence, yeah.
Well, about whether we have the funds or the means to develop new manufacturing methods within our current assignment, I am not so sure. What we are trying to do at this point is at least to identify which are the promising technologies, and then we are trying to provide it, to give a hand as much as possible so that they can break through, so that they can go on. For instance, one of the ideas that I was referring during my presentation, it was that we were giving this award to demonstrate that some technologies can be used in the real world. So I mean, it's on the contribution, and this would include, for instance, some implementation or some development in manufacturing. Thing is that, well, so far we are only having the 35K, which is not that much, but the idea is that if we are successful with this endeavor, hopefully that we can keep going and growing, and if, maybe that our stakeholders will understand that this is actually something that industry is asking, and that where we can have a good impact to achieve our industrial objectives, because we should recall that the third of our industrial objectives is to make sure that European industry is competitive, and we are fostering the use of technologies, make them more competitive. So I think that these two elements fit. We need to have then the fundings. That is something that should come little by little. Hopefully the outcome of our current activities will be the trigger for going a bit further.
If I mean, when we ask companies to produce something for ITER, for broader approach, for which some scaling up or qualification of their manufacturing processes is necessary, we pay for this. But I think it's also important to keep in mind that whilst in the startup world, the mantra is fail fast. In the public mega project world, the mantra is fail not, which means that we are not really willing to take many risks. when it comes to which technologies are used for manufacturing. We are very conservative. It also comes from the fact that the nuclear regulators are, by their nature, very conservative in the approach to new technologies. So it's not very often that we ask, companies to completely to significantly modify or develop their processes. We tend to rely on processes that are quite well established. The second part of the question, can you please repeat it, Soren?
Just a second. Yeah, this is whether it is your impression that the industry still takes an ad hoc, ITT-driven approach to the bids.
Yes, I must say that it is, yes, it is. My impression is that companies essentially look at fusion opportunities, or in general, big science opportunities as on a project-by-project basis. We have very, very few companies, in fact, having set up a business unit which is looking at all big science opportunities, I mean, as a whole, as a market, and have a strategy which encompasses various units. Most companies, probably 80% or 85%, still look at the individual opportunities, decide if they want to bid or not on the basis of the individual opportunities. So they have this piecemeal approach, which of course is not optimal, but on the other hand, we cannot pretend much more. Companies have to do their own business, and we are just one small brick in their overall business. We have noticed, however, that there is, especially in certain areas now, an increasing numbers of what we call them system integrators, but with a slightly different meaning than the way in which this was used in the past. But these are companies having certain skills which are not linked to a specific technology or process, but are linked to the way in which you organize a complex product development in a big science organization, which by definition is a bit unstable. Big science projects are by definition unstable. And these companies then are able to bring in technology providers and to aggregate these technology providers in a unified project. So we aggregate several technology providers with the purpose of, in the end, delivering a product. And it is very good for us. It provides some degree of stability and clearly seems to indicate a direction in which companies could move, at least some companies could move.
Thank you for that. I'll take the one last question, and I think that I will direct this to you, Tony. So, and this is from Dairo Cruz from the FusionNet, the European Fusion Education Network, who are asking, how do you attract the students and young talent towards the fusion industry upcoming projects and needs, particularly in a field like fusion, where young talent is also needed to carry out the extensive research required to move forward to the European fusion roadmap, and also taking into account that other members of the energy sector are actively investing in attracting the new generations to their respective fields. And before giving you the opportunity to answer, Tony, I'll just add that before, when I referred to the generation demo generation, this was inspired by, as I said, a presentation by Leonardo at the inauguration of North, where Leonardo had made a rough calculation estimating that out of the current staff at FOE and ITER, you will only have 20-25% still in the field, so not having retired at the time of the start of demo. So this is with the timescales we are at, recruitment, as several of you have mentioned, is very important. So I think this is a very important question. But yeah, Tony, do you have comments for this?
Well, I can talk hours for that, but I see Anna Belen already. So let me be short. Fusion is very interesting, and it's a hype. You can see the large amount of privately invested companies. You can see that also ITER is coming now slowly into a state where it starts operating. We have other big devices like GT60 in Europe. We have DTT, by the way, Leonardo. After the ITER magnets, there will be the DTT magnet for a few years, but okay, it's just a few years. But it's a field which is really attracting students. We see it at the universities, at the university courses. So young people really want to go into that field. So at the one, and since Dario Cruz is going to coordinate FusionNet in a few weeks from now, so he will be, let's say, at the front line. So he will see all the students. And we need to take care that we also educate the students with the proper courses. So we need to develop it. We should not just give them the classical courses, but we really need to think carefully what kind of competences are needed. Not only in the bachelor programs, the master programs, but we need also to do that in the PhD programs and further on with postdocs. Actually, while we are talking now, we are selecting 15 engineering grantees which are focused on tasks which are important for ITER, for FRE, and for demos. So we have asked these organizations what is needed. What we really need to do, where certainly we can gain a lot, is also to involve industry in that. Because we also think there could be a benefit of having these people either fully in industry or to allow them to have a kind of period of 3 months, 6 months, working closely with the industry, to see also how the industry works. So we need to bring industry much closer to the education needs. And I see FusionNet is already partly doing that because FusionNet has a number of industrial partners. And since I was professor at Eindhoven University, I know that a number of students from there went to Tokamak Energy, which I think is very good. And we should also make it possible that some of these students go to Framatome or to Ansaldo to work with the people which are building the components now for ITER. So really important to think about the young generation and to make a knowledge management strategy which goes all the way from, I would say, secondary school to, let's say, the older generation. And yes, we need to replace people like me. My retirement is in 1.5 years. So I'm probably the oldest here. I probably start doing other things in fusion then, but you know, we need to have young people which take over and take the lead. And we are in a very exciting field because we're now coming to the generation of people which really make fusion to work. So we did a lot of preparatory work in the last 50 years. And now we get the young generation taking over and they will see the fusion fire and deliver electricity to the grid. So very, very good to get these people involved.
Thank you very much, Tony. I think that, Belen, do we have time for just a round of closing remarks now, if people have a last comment?
Yes, I think we have some minutes.
Okay, so I'll just before ending this very fruitful and interesting, I hope the audience also agrees, it was very interesting roundtable. I'd just like to give all of you an opportunity for a short closing remark. And so I'll start in the top corner here. So that is you, David.
Thanks very much, Søren. Well, I was very pleased to be invited to make a short presentation here. Thank you very much for the invitation, Belen. And I like the way the discussion's gone. I think there are many opportunities for collaboration, some elements of competition along with the collaboration, of course, but competition of technologies to see which new opportunities can emerge, which could accelerate progress towards fusion energy. But my overall impression, and this is influenced as well by COP26 at the moment, my overall impression is the world is not doing anywhere near enough to decarbonize. There's a lot of groupthink among politicians thinking they're sort of doing enough. They're not really. The protesters do have a bit of a point, and fusion should emerge as a very important option for future low carbon energy. And I think that will, private investment will help to accelerate public investment. And I look forward to a time when the world is investing 10 or 20 billion dollars a year, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 times as much as at present, to really push the timescales. And you could look at the timescales as the time necessary to spend 50 or 60 billion dollars. And if the money is more available, the timescales will shrink. Not completely, but they'll certainly be accelerated. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David. And Jay?
Thank you. Well, I will be very short. I also would like to thank the organizers first for inviting me, but also for organizing this kind of meetings and discussions, because they are really very interesting. I would like to invite all the people that attend this meeting to think about a little bit about donors, about the EMIR donors facility, because this is especially if they are coming from companies, because this is a relatively small project. It's a relatively different to the other ones that we have in fusion. It's not a tokamak machine, it's not a plasma machine, but it is something in between the accelerators technologies community and the fusion community. And I think this could be a very interesting project that can bridge the gap in some way between different technologies that are very useful in different areas. So I really hope that we can start the project very soon, and I invite all the people to maintain some interest in what is going on the project.
Thank you. And Leonardo?
So I would like to reconnect to what David said. The world is not doing enough, and I think it's absolutely true. And maybe some of you remember a slide which was used already several years ago, but still very much valid, comparing the annual cost for ITER by all the parties with the annual profits, not revenues, profits of some large companies. And I'm not even speaking about, Apple or, though they are large companies, but even if you look at luxury goods companies, they make annual profits which can fund several ITER projects. So when I'm told fusion is a luxury we cannot afford, I could not disagree more. We afford a lot of luxury goods, and therefore a fusion could be part of it. So definitely, when we look at these figures, ITER 20 billion, 30 billion, it sounds a lot of money, but it's spread over 30 years. In the end, it's really marginal funding. So I completely agree with what David said. We're not doing enough. But on the other hand, I also have to admit that having money raining on fusion project is not going necessarily to make things better, because we also have a very fundamental issue with the development life cycles of these machines, which is too long. It takes too long to move from the conceptual to the detailed design to the construction, installation, and operation. We need to find ways to shorten this development life cycle. I don't know how this could be done. I have certain ideas, but I'm not a fusion scientist. So what I see is the need to shorten the development life cycle. Because if we are able to do this, we will really have quick progress in the direction of fusion energy in the grid. When we still have life cycles for machines which span 40 years, I don't think we will be really able to move much. Thank you, Soren. Thank you, Belen, for organizing this. It's an excellent event as always. It's very nice to be with colleagues here. discussing interesting topics. I hope
Thank
they're
you.
also interesting for those listening, and not just interesting for me, David, Tony, Angel. I hope they're interesting for everybody.
Thank you, Leonardo. And indeed, there would be many more topics we could discuss longer. But I'll give the now the word to you, Tony, for the last closing remark.
Yeah, also thank you, but I did that already at the beginning of my talk. So let me focus on resonating with David and Leonardo. I have the pleasure to live now in Germany, and Germany has 40% of the electricity coming from renewables. And since Fukushima in 2011, they started with the Energiewende, and every year they have invested 25 billion subsidies in wind and solar. So that's 1 ITER per year, which is paid just by Germany as a single country. And still what happened, the CO2 emission by electricity generation didn't decrease substantially. It stayed at the same level. And the reason is that the renewables have phased out nuclear. So nuclear went down from 33% to 11% now. And a lot of the energy is exported because some days Germany has too much wind and too much energy. And so if I compare that with the overall fusion budget, the fusion budget is really on a world level way too small. And if we take our future and the climate serious, we need to invest in all options. So I don't want to, let's say, compare fusion with renewables or fission. We need to do everything, because otherwise, by the end of this century, we indeed have 2.5 or maybe even 3 or 4 degrees temperature increase. Fusion will probably not be there by 2050, although some of the private companies have more optimistic views. I agree that if we have more money, we can do things faster. I think we could deliver demo in the order of 10 years earlier if there's, let's say, more energy. And I have also seen that ITER could be done a little faster if there would be more money. Not very much faster, because still, I agree with Leonardo that you are with cycli, which are very difficult to let's say, make shorter. But we can gain there, and it's really now the time to also show the world and the politicians that we need more effort in this area. So I completely concur with this.
Thank you very much, Tony. And on my behalf, I would like to thank all the panelists for a very good roundtable and good presentations and discussions. And now I'll give the word to you, Belen.
Okay, thanks once again to all the speakers and also to you, Soren, for being moderating this interesting roundtable. Plenty of interesting topics were raised. We hope it has sparked your interest to explore further opportunities next October in Granada. Please check the BSBF website. We sincerely hope you register soon. Remember that next up in the series is the last webinar devoted to high energy accelerators and synchrotrons, the 30th of November, and registration is already open. All the presentations will be available on the webinar webpage. So once again, thanks to everyone for attending this webinar, and see you in 2 weeks' time. Bye.